welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm an e-learning evangelist here at eLearning Brothers. Today we're going to be talking about user experience strategies for successful e-learning. This webinar will be recorded. We'll get a copy of it sent out to everybody that's in attendance later today. It usually takes us an hour or two, so be checking for that in your email. We will also post this on our blog later in the week. Possibly early next week, but be checking back on the blog for that, and you can access it anytime or share it with whoever you think should see it. If you have questions during this webinar, we'll be ready to answer your questions in the questions panel. I see some of you have already found that. Please feel free to use that questions panel. I'll try to bring up some of the questions with our presenter. Just so you know, one of the things we like to do after the webinar is try to follow up as soon as possible. Sometimes it's just to get feedback. Most of the time, we would like to touch base and find out if anyone needs some one-on-one clarification about our webinar topics after the fact. Also, anyone that doesn't already have an eLearning Brothers account, we will be giving a free eLearning Brothers accounts to everyone who is in attendance. So you can also check for your email for that. All right, to talk to us about user experience strategies, we have Dan Frazee, one of our e-learning developers, with us today. Thanks for joining us, Dan. We were originally going to have Amber Rodbell present with us. You may already know Amber or have seen Amber in a webinar previous. Something unforeseen came up today, and so she wasn't able to come, and Dan was kind enough to step up and share some of his knowledge with us. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, Dan, and I'll make you the presenter as well.
Right. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. Okay. So
all right, we're seeing your screen. It looks great.
All right, cool. So first off, as you said, Dan Frazee, I'm an e-learning developer, and I think it's kind of important to just kind of talk a little bit about what that means for eLearning Brothers Custom. We have we separate our roles most of the time in the e-learning industry. People that are called developers or instructional designers do it all. So probably most people on the line here are familiar with, they get the content, they're doing their interviews of the subject matter experts, and they're doing everything. So they're pulling the content, organizing it, and then actually building it in the tools. So where eLearning Brothers sort of specializes those roles, so where we have instructional designers who take the content, organize it, build storyboards, and then it gets to me, who I have a background in in design. I went to Western Michigan for graphic design. I got my degree in that. So that's more where my perspective is. So I thought it was kind of important to bring that up. Okay, so one of the things that I did want to talk about is something that's easy for me to talk about, because it's a project that I've been working on with Sigma Chi, and they're a fraternity, so they focus on training. It's an organization that recruits young men who display the values similar to their own, and through training of these young men, as well as giving them different roles and responsibilities, they transform what's known as pledges into brothers. Some of these members include Drew Brees and Brad Pitt, and there's many other well-known Sigma Chi's that have went through that program. Once in a while, we just had the opportunity to work on a project that the outcome is it ends up just being perfect. And in so many ways, I'm working on this project through working with our instructional designers. The outcome is just really great, and I'm going to show some of that to you. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through some of the things that were successful, and then talk through what are some of the standard and common pitfalls that I see as we're designing our courses. So why don't you go ahead and play that that video? I like to start it off with a video that demonstrates some of this officer training course.
Sure.
All right. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so yeah, so I kind of wanted to start this off with a video to get you guys excited about it, what we're looking at. I think that video and getting started with motion graphics it's a really great thing to do with all of our e-learning courses. It's one of those things that when you show a high quality or high production value right out of the gates, it sets people up to think, you know, I think when I just got assigned some training recently, and the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh, great, I'm going to have to sit through some training. And when you start off with something cool like a splash screen, it helps to break it up, and it helps to make you think like, okay, this might not be so terrible. So that's why I wanted to start that off with a video, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I'm going to kind of take a step back and talk about this project, this officer training project that we worked with Sigma Chi to create. And one of the most important things that we find is our designers, what they did really well here is they focused on the target audience. And in this specific case study, it was pretty easy to do because we're talking about such a very specific demographic of young men, 18 to 23-ish, that are going through this program. So that allows us to really kind of narrow in. And the more you can narrow in and know about your audience, the better you'll be able to make decisions that are going to lead to engagement, which is the most important thing for anybody to pull away any knowledge from what it is that you're training on. One of the questions that I found was the most influential in this case, and there's many questions that you can ask about your audience that'll help you get to the right place. But one of the things in this case that we asked was, what do they spend their time doing? And the result is, specifically a lot of mobile sort of social types of sites, social media. It's specifically Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Tinder, and they do a lot of texting. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to leverage those things by creating sort of a simulated, simplified version of those types of interactions, and through that was use that as the primary vehicle for getting the content across. And so what we did was we spent a lot more time up front creating those templates, and I'll go through some of those in a second here, but we spent our time up front creating those templates, making sure that they worked really well, making sure that they had nice sound effects. And that video didn't really show that, but they also have good sound effects that, when the text comes in, it's like ding, and good feedback, sounds like and that kind of stuff, that it helps increase the engagement that we're talking about. So from a overall, I talked a little bit about knowing your audience. Let's talk about high level design, because design is one of the most important things, in my opinion, because you could have great content and if your design falls flat, you're not going to really, you're going to lose your learners really quick. Sometimes you can even have bad content, but your design is really good, and at least your learners are going to come away with something. So one of the things that I wanted to show, and this is an example of where we get started. So at eLearning Brothers, one of our initial phases is we have one of our graphic designers create a look and feel, and that is just some of the basic stuff that we pull from our clients' guidelines, our branding guidelines and standards, and we turn it into whatever the project that we're working on. We turn it into the e-learning version of that in a look and feel. The reason why this is not actually the one, this is another project that I'm working on currently that I thought was prettier, so I brought it in. But this one was more of that look and feel for the course that I built with the officer training.
Hey, Dan, if you've got a second, we've got a question that has come up.
Sure.
David wants to know, so your analysis phrase often consists of your target audience and what they spend most of their time doing. Is that right?
No, not necessarily. So oftentimes there's a lot more detail involved in that. A lot of times we really need to know, like, what type of device is the training going to be using? What's their job, what's their position, what's their background, what's the demographic. So and I will kind of answer that more from a high level perspective to David, is just saying that, like, first off, I'm not an instructional designer. I'm a e-learning developer, and our roles are sort of split up so that I get a storyboard, and then my focus is to take that storyboard and really make it sing and make sure that it's functioning really well. My responsibilities are more on making sure that the content that it comes across well, and that it's a good user experience.
Sure. And is your design often controlled by your client's branding standards?
Yeah. Yep. And that's kind of what I'm getting into now, is that we take our client's branding standards, and then based on the specific project, we'll modify it to come up with our look and feel, which includes screens like this, as well as our interactions and such.
Okay. So, and as you're making this, how often are you asking the client for input as opposed to interacting with the ID?
Yeah, so very often. So because we create what's called a visual storyboard, sometimes we'll do it in Storyline or Captivate inside the actual tool, where we'll do like a rapid prototype type thing. Or other times, and it depends on our clients and the relationship that we have with them, which model we take, but sometimes we use actually PowerPoint to create our storyboards. But either way, I will get that, and then that's when I'm responsible to build the course out of that. It'll have things like what the screen should, you know, for the most part look like, and what the narration and such. Okay, so to continue on here, I talked a little bit about the look and feel. So oftentimes I'll use this as kind of just a checkpoint to make sure that I'm doing things consistently. One thing that I'd like to highlight is, like, for example, the titles here. They're using uppercase. And then we've got subheads that are bold, but then we've got, just regular copy in all the text for that. And one thing I want to talk about with that is take the time. That's one of the tips that I have, is to take the time to set this up within your tool, whether it's Captivate, Lectora, or Storyline. Take the time to actually go into your slide design tab and make sure you're choosing those fonts, so that you're not having to try to count on remembering to change the fonts to make sure that they're consistent as you go through. So okay, so I want to go ahead and show show one of the splash screens. So that was one of the things that I think it's important to create, and that's why I showed a video at the beginning of this, is I think it's important to create some sort of animation at the beginning. And typically my rule for these is that I don't like them to go any longer than 10 to 15 seconds. So I'm just going to go ahead and show this one. But I think it creates that feeling of engagement. And if you create one that's generic, and I'll show you another one after I show this, you're creating that sense of engagement right out of the gates for your learner, so that they're starting to, it changes from oh, I got to do this, when do I get to click the next button, to this might not actually be that bad. So I justify taking a little bit extra time, and then so I had a series of courses that had several different roles for the Sigma Chi fraternity. There's the Magister, the recruitment chairman, there's Quaestar, which is like the treasurer, consul, and other roles. And what we were able to reuse a lot of stuff. So we built our course with that concept in mind, that we could reuse many things, and then we would just customize some of the things, like by adding a logo to certain things, like to the watch. Like each one of these icons represents one of the specific roles. Here's another one I'll show from a different series of courses for Sigma Chi. Sorry about that. But I took the time to take some of these elements within this logo, and I broke them up so that I could use some of the Storyline animations to bring them in an interesting way. And then I had like a little sheen effect that I added to it. It's very simple, but I was able to reuse this course in the series of courses that we created many times. Okay, on that same note, overall, one of the things that I try to focus on is just simplicity. So I'm going to go ahead and look at one of these that I have published out, which I should have done that in the first place. But here, let me move this. So I'm just going to go ahead and look at one of these interactions. So let's see. I'll pick the Instagram one. And as the way that I just want to kind of look at this and why it works, and talk about some of the common mistakes or things that don't work in contrast to this. One of the things is that I see commonly is the use of like large banners. And I understand why that happens. Large gaudy headers that get in the way of our content. And it makes sense, because as we're like preparing to build our course, we're building a design for it, and we want to create something that is, you know, we feel like we have to fill the space, and that's kind of the gut feeling that I just want to challenge. Is if you're ever doing something to fill the space, that's probably not right. You should really, your design should be solely focused on the content. And that's another thing that I wanted to kind of bring up as why this is a really good example is this player. So like you notice that this, yes, it looks like the standard storyline player, and it is, but you notice it doesn't have all these crazy colors to it, because, you know, I do see that it's kind of people's nature to want to, like, oh, we got to make this really colorful. We have to use all of the colors within our branding guide. But I would like to challenge that, because overall, really what's important is the content. We want our users focusing as much on the content as possible. So our standard at eLearning Brothers Custom is we usually create sometimes this whole color will be a different color, but we just want to make sure that we're really focusing in on the content as much as possible. And we do that by simplifying the player. Like, for example, you don't notice that this button doesn't have that typical gray rounded edge. It doesn't happen until you roll over it. It's a very small detail, but it's something that makes a big difference for your final user. One of the things that our IDs did really well on this, you know, it's just such a simple, sleek design, but they organize the content in a way that, you know, the main learning element is here, and then they've just got supplemental information that's happening with their image and text on this that represents a post that someone made in their Instagram. The other thing that's kind of cool is the use of the relative motion path and storyline on this animation, with this block in the background that highlights where it's going. All right. So yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about just the concept of using templates. So when I built this, I spent most of my time building these templates and making sure that they're fully fleshed out before I started to build out the rest of the interactions to put content in them. Because this, you know, e-learning tools that we use today are very procedural. So it's one of those things that you really got to make sure you're testing the stuff that you build, not only just in your local preview of the course, but also in the different tools that you use, like tablets, and if you're you know, taking on building stuff with phones, it's good to test it. One of the resources that you can use for that is Browser Stack. We use Browser Stack because we don't have all the possible different devices, so we will use tools that help emulate those different scenarios. Okay, I'll go ahead and go back to this. Oh, so yeah, one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about with when we came up with the concept of how we were going to represent these different roles, we created this concept of a host character. And now that's really common in e-learning that we create these host characters. But one of the decisions that was made was that this host character was going to be a representative of that role. So his name is Derek, and he is, in this case, this course that I'm looking at, he's the Magister. He was a Magister before, so he's talking you through his experiences and the types of interactions that we're doing. We're putting ourselves in his shoes. So he's like our text example, which we'll go through. We're telling a story, and it involves Derek in the Magister role, and we just reused Derek in all of the different roles. We reused him. We didn't overcomplicate it. Oftentimes I see that people get really overwhelmed when they come up with a host character. They might, one of the things that could have happened was we could have thought, oh, well, we can't make Derek the Magister but also the recruitment chairman. We need to make sure that, we're using different characters. But at the end of the day, you don't need to it's really easy to overcomplicate those things. What we just did was we changed his clothes in every shot, or in every time you see him, and we customized it a little bit by adding that icon to the different areas. And I'll just kind of show you a little bit of what the artwork or our artboard looked like for the whole series of courses. While that opens up, I'll just go ahead and open the storyline file for the Magister course that we worked on, and to highlight some of the things, the concept of simplicity and templatizing. Okay, so you notice that, like, for all our courses, all of these screens that we built, I was able to reuse them over and over and just change out the content. So here, Derek, it's hard to see, but Derek has the apple, which is the icon that we used to represent the Magister role. And then you see he's like on his hat there, and we're using different poses to mix it up. We got a 3/4 view here. We have a half here, and then we actually sometimes will use the full body.
Hey Dan, how did you create those characters? What did you use to create the animated looking characters?
Yep, so we just used Adobe Illustrator, but you can use, we have custom designers that that draw. Actually, he uses a sketch pad, and then he brings it into Illustrator and works on it. But I wanted to show this to kind of show like how simple, like all this whole series of courses, this is the graphics that we used for all of it. And there's just not a lot of different variances that we needed to use. Most of it's just changing the color of the shirt, or flipping the guy from left to right. We're creating those variances. It feels like there's a lot more difference than there actually is. But I would recommend using stock libraries. Oftentimes you can get a very good base for something like this. Our stock library, the eLearning Brothers stock library, has a lot of really good illustrated characters. And we also use, on the custom side, we use Adobe stock.
So another question here is, what dictated the decision to use an animated character as opposed to a photorealistic cutout person?
Yeah, so we thought that would work better with our audience, but also through our look and feel type discovery phase. That was really just what the client chose. Usually we'll have different representations in our original look and feel phase, where we'll have more photorealistic type representations of the look and feel, and this was just the one that they chose. There's another Sigma Chi course that I just built that we're using more of a 3D approach, but the decision is basically off of the audience, what we think that they would, work well for them or they react to better.
And that's your decision, or is it the client's decision?
It's the client's decision. I mean, we certainly influence it by, you know, our thoughts and
making suggestions.
With our look and feel, we say, oh, you know, we certainly influence it, but we also try not to influence it to a point too, because we really do want our clients making the decisions, because they know more than we do. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of show you, see how we had the icons that represented it, and that's like our one bit of customization that we're doing to each of these courses, where they're very similar at a whole, but we're doing small things to customize them. Okay, close that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just go through another one of these examples. So we'll go through the Tinder interaction. So this is a really good concept. Tinder is something that they use a lot. You know, I use too. But anyways, the concept of swiping left or right, it's just taking the base concept, taking a true or false question and turning it into an interaction that represents this thing that we believe our content or our audience is using a lot. So we'll either like it or we'll swipe left or right by selecting these icons. Oh, I was wrong. So we're just, as much as possible, we're trying to match, you know, the design concept of Tinder. Oh, I got that one right. All right, and the core concept of this is training on Sigma Chi's alcohol policy. A lot of this content focuses on, you know, not hazing. That was a traditional thing within fraternities, is the hazing that is phasing out, and a lot of the training has to do with why that is so important. Okay, we'll go ahead and just go through a Snapchat. This one was really fun because I looked at Snapchat and I tried to figure out how can I create that same feeling inside a storyline. So I, you know, played with the different types of animations to kind of match that feel. So in this version, we have our question, and you drag and drop your answer via stickers. So I think this is Suck It Up and Deal. I just like the icon on that one, so I'll just put that there. Oh, that wasn't right. I think it's Tell Someone. Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned that you don't get the full effect for in this is the sound effects. It makes a big difference. And if you're focusing your energy on building templates and reusing those templates, you can use the same thing over and over, and it's a copy and paste, and then you're just changing out content. That's one of also the design concepts that I just want to challenge is and I see a lot of instructional designers feel like I'm an instructional designer. It's my job to constantly switch things up and constantly change the way that I'm presenting the information, because people are going to get bored. And I just would like to challenge that, because I feel like as we're going through this training, for example, the user gets to a Snapchat. Well, first off, overall, we're only using probably, like I mentioned, Instagram, Snapchat, Tinder, texting. We've only used probably 5 or 6 like total interaction types as we built this whole series of courses. And it just works out so much better, because as the learner is going through it, they're not having to learn how to do the interaction. They're focusing specifically on the content, because they've done the interaction before, and the interaction design itself is so intuitive that there's really not, it's not that way, in that many ways to screw it up. Like another example is, we don't actually have the instructions on the screen. It's simple enough that, and we have added our instructions to audio. So it's just really easy to figure out what it is that I need to do. So that's more and more elements, and that's one of the things that, I'm not doing a good job at bringing us back to this, to my PowerPoint, but that's like one of the things that I just really want to stress is just simplify. And that's one of the examples that I gave with the player is, we've simplified it down so that all the focus is going on the content. A part of that, I ask myself, and we ask ourselves these types of questions regularly, as we're designing our screens. Can I remove any unnecessary things? Can I move any of the content into VoiceOver so that my visuals are less busy? And then lastly, can I use color or typography to make less important information visually less important? One of the examples that I want to show for that is our Twitter example. But I think that one of the things that, as an e-learning design or developer, I'm constantly struggling with is, sometimes you just get a block of content and you're like, how do I design that in a way that's gonna, not feel so boring? And I thought that this is a good example of a way that we did that. We have our at whatever, which I'm not a Twitter person, but I think that's like who it is, or their Twitter tag, and then the name of the person. But the use of this typography is a good representation of visual hierarchy, like what's important in this design. You have the name, which is very contrasty with this typography. You have the body content, which is the content of the message, and then you have like their Twitter tag, which by the use of typography and color, we've faded it back so that it's less important information, but it's information regardless. So in this case, I really like this interaction because we're putting ourselves in the shoes of our audience. Derek, who is our magister, he's asked us via VoiceOver, hey, can you help me? I've got this guy that's asking me about this annual wrestling competition, which was recently nixed because it didn't line up with our core values. How should I respond to this? So we have a few different options, and the way that you answer them is by dragging them into the Twitter feed. Just because you've always done it doesn't mean continuing the activity. Could be considered hazing. Upholding the values of Sigma Chi first. I think that's the right answer. And then the Twitter feed adjusts, and we get our feedback from Sigma Chi saying that's right. Oh, looks like I must have turned something off there. But and then Derek responds saying thank you. So that's a good one.
Quick question on this one, Dan. As you guys are more or less mimicking different social media platforms, are you using the branding guide initially that was created, or are you mimicking the look and feel according to the website that you're mimicking?
Yeah, it's more, these would, I would say more, it's about the websites that we're mimicking. But one of the really great things that we do that really that eLearning Brothers Customs does that sets us apart from other organizations that I've worked at is our checks and balances we do at our storyboarding phase. So a lot of these visual decisions that we're making, we're doing and getting client sign off on it as we go. So we're not separating ourselves, making these decisions away from the client, and then presenting them this course that they are like, oh, where did this stuff come from? Like, we have a lot of checks and balances built into our process that doesn't allow for that to happen. Okay. Any other questions? I feel like I'm kind of. I guess
Sure. Yeah, we can take a second for some questions. We've got a few that are kind of overarching here. One person wants to know, in this particular Sigma Chi module, is it dumping data into an LMS, or does it provide proof of completion somehow, or how are you tracking its the user in this?
Yeah. So okay, good question. Yeah. So this does have a final assessment that we use, and that's one thing that I did want to bring up is that you do notice that in all of the courses that I build, I always want to make sure that our final assessment is just visually very different than everything else that they've done. That's one of the kind of rules that I implement, is I want to make sure that if somebody's getting to a graded section, that they not only know because we've told them, which we've told them here, Derek's told them, but also like once they start getting into the questions, I really like to make sure that it's very visually different. But yes, we're recording it via a final assessment, and then there's the results.
Okay, awesome. Another question is, throughout your course, do you have a help feature if someone doesn't know what to do? Like in a drag and drop or something like that. Do they receive assistance, or do they just have to guess and then loop back with feedback?
Yeah, so no, we don't. And I mean, we have done that before, but I think that question, that's a great question for kind of something that I do see typically as instructional designers sometimes don't. And one of the reasons why you see things that are so busy with like instructional text, I feel like we just don't give our learners enough credit. If we're designing our interactions to be really simple, we've all done e-learning before, and when you do get to something where you don't know what to do, what's your first reaction? You start clicking around and like, I'm going to click around. That's our learners do that. And in this specific case, I think that we had a little bit more ability to give our learners even more technological credit, because they're such a young age group and they're just used to figuring out stuff like that. So I think that gave us a little bit of extra leverage to not have to explain things as much. But I do think overall we have a tendency to not give the learners as much credit as I think they're due.
Okay, and then one more question in regards to that Twitter example that you had. Why doesn't this slide, they say, why doesn't this slide have any description as to what, or direction as to what you're supposed to do on that slide? For example, you don't have anything that says drag the correct answer over.
Yeah, so we have actually given that in VoiceOver.
Okay.
Yep, and that's and that thought there, like, oh, well, what if they get stuck? The credit that we're giving our learners is if they miss that in VoiceOver, they're just going to replay the slide because they really don't have any other option. This specific, setup, we actually have, and I'm not sure if this, it's not showing, but we actually had to lock down the courses, which is another thing that I would challenge you as an e-learning developer, is do you really need to lock the courses down? I guess what I look at for that is we did some Franklin Covey training, and one of the core messages, the speed of trust. And I feel like when we're locking stuff down, our learners naturally feel like, oh, they don't trust me. Like, well, I'm not going to pay attention to this. I feel like there's like this underarching feeling that people feel like, oh, I'm just going to click next whenever I'm able to go get a cup of coffee or do something else. Maybe it's done. I'll go click next again. But overall, to go back to answering that question, I got a little sidetracked. I think that, you know, with it, when it comes to instruction, we're just not giving our learners enough credit.
Okay, and I said that was the last question, but one more, a couple more did come in, but I wanna
Sure. Go ahead.
this one. Are you designing? Is this course for desktop only? Do you have? Are you designing it for mobile as well?
Yeah, these are all working on tablets, and that was a part of our development process before we, like I said, before we started to use these templates as templates. We are going through all of our testing on tablets, making sure that, you know, the core functionality is working, and then that's when we say, okay, now, you know, so basically we chose one of the courses, which was it was officer or recruitment chairman was the role that we built out first, and then we did that because it had the most modules in it, because it's a lot easier to delete content than it is to add it. So we built that one out first. We're making intelligent decisions about how not only to build our templates, but how to utilize them in the most efficient manner. Tested that all, got that all through, and then once we did that, then we started to build the other courses.
Okay, and then since you have VoiceOver as your instruction, do you have 508 compliance features? Do you have any speech to text on the screen at any point, or any options to have that?
Nope, not in this course. It's definitely something that we do. Storyline actually has a really, Storyline's gotten so much better when it comes to WCAG compliance. I've done some testing with JAWS, does a lot better, but on this specific course, that was not one of the requirements. But it's definitely a consideration that you need to make if you are building content for the government or for another organization that requires it. It's an important thing, and even more so, you kind of need to simplify what you're building.
Okay. So because your client didn't specify it, it wasn't being built in.
Yeah, and it's not that we didn't ask. That's a question that we always ask during our sales process is, you know, does this need to be? And in this case, it didn't.
The answer came back no. All right. We have a couple more questions, but we can take those at the very end. So we've only got 12 minutes left, so we'll try to take those questions at the end.
All right. Well, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to show some of this work. This is, like I said, one of the most fun projects that I've worked on, and this client is just awesome. I felt like we, as an organization, really helped. They trusted us right out of the gates, and we felt like, you know, we felt very comfortable with providing our suggestions, and they were really good at taking them. So I think that that's one of the ways that when projects go really well, it's when you have that, you know, that good working relationship with your clients.
Awesome. I'm going to take the screen back just for a second and share something here, and then we'll take a couple more questions before we close out. So give me just a second here. All right, so as you can see there on the screen, we've got customizable courseware on the right and then schedule a free demo on the left. So Dan is a part of our custom team. They're developing all kinds of amazing stuff. Who are some of our clients that we've been working with recently? You've got Sigma Chi. I know PayPal has been a big one. What are some other ones that we've been doing work with, Dan, on the custom side?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot. Yeah, PayPal is one of our biggest. PG&E, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola.
I'm sorry, I put you on the spot. I know there's tons.
No, that's all right. We have so many clients. It's and big name clients. Yeah.
And if you guys want to see some of that work, even if it's just to get some ideas or anything, give that phone number a call there on the left, 801-796-2767. You can also send us an email at info@elearningbrothers.com. We'd love to talk to you about the work we do for custom. Or if you want to customize your own courses, you can buy, we've got our new customizable courses that put you in control. You can learn more at elearningbrothers.com/customizable-courseware. All right, let's dive into a couple more of these last questions. Overall arching here. So before you really dive into building a course, do you create several different designs and then present those to your client for them to pick one? Or do you just kind of sketch it out in front of them? How do you decide what design to go for, and how do you make sure you don't design too much before you have it approved by the client?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the way that we do it is definitely, I mean, we have a very phased approach, and there's always talk about the ADDIE module versus the SAM module, and officially we follow the ADDIE methodology, the waterfall approach. However, I feel like because we have so many more checkpoints where we're getting back to our clients and saying and showing them what we're working on, it feels a little bit more like SAM. But yeah, the way that we do it is our initial look and feel phase that we do is very small. We have some very standard screens, what does an objective screen look like? What does the intro screen look like? Sure. What does a quiz question screen look like? And we will sketch sketch those out. Sometimes we'll pick even a few of those screens and just kind of say, here's some overall approach, here's an illustrative approach, here's a 3D approach, here's a photorealistic approach, and that will be even less screens. So we'll do maybe 3 of each version of those and send that along. And then once they decide, then we'll do the full look and feel. Then we'll once that's approved, then we go into our storyboarding phase, which has multiple phases. So yeah.
Okay, excellent. Another question, you spoke a lot about user experience concepts and rules of thumb. Do you have any type of user experience Bible or reference that's primary source that you use when thinking about user experience?
No. Sorry.
All right, simple question and answer. Okay, and then the last question, and we get this one all the time. Do you personally prefer Storyline or Captivate?
I don't. Okay. I prefer Storyline. That's but that's just because that's the one that I specialize in. But yeah, no, it's not just because that. I prefer Storyline.
That's it. All right, great. Thank you for your time, Dan. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll have more webinars next week, and we hope you'll join us for those then. Thanks, and see you next time.